Well, last week I talked about Frankenstein, the Golem legends, and us. This week I'm going to talk about something which is probably equally as strange to hear anything about a Quaker meeting for a couple of reasons. I'm going to talk about Samson. See? And of course, one reason you don't hear about Samson that much in Quaker meetings is, of course, the violence thing. Another reason is that most of that whole cycle of stories are terribly misogynistic. I mean, there is only one woman in the entire thing that is portrayed positively, and we don't even know her name. And if I remember correctly, Samson is not a traditional name given to little Quaker boys, and certainly Delilah is not a name given to little Quaker girls, traditionally. And when we do hear about the story of Samson, it's always about the end of it. And let's face it, the Delilah thing is essentially a soap opera. But it didn't start out that way. Around the year that most of the adults in this room anyway probably grew up calling 1200 BC, there was a collapse of civilization, of the civilizations of the day. That's exactly right, Ollie. The Sea Peoples, and there's only one group that emerged out of that is still important: Israel. Because the earliest mention of Israel as a collection of people dates from just before 1200 BC. In fact, there is even a popular history called 1177 BC, the year that civilization ended. And for whatever reason, the Minoans were gone. The Mycenaeans collapsed on Crete. The Mycenaeans were on mainland Greece. The Minoans were gone. The Hittites collapsed in modern Turkey. The Mesopotamian civilizations collapsed, and Egypt nearly collapsed. And it is even, as Ollie mentioned, there were the mysterious Sea Peoples, the chief among whom are known in the pages of the Hebrew Bible or Christian Old Testament as the Philistines, who settled in what is now the Gaza Strip primarily, right about that time. And against the background of all that chaos, you have this story. And I think I may just paraphrase most of it for you. There was a man of the tribe of Dan, and at least part of the tribe of Dan may have been among the Sea Peoples. That's an older theory, maybe so, maybe no. That moved in and got absorbed into the growing people that was Israel. There was a man in the tribe of Dan, which at that point was down on the coast, right where the Philistines were coming in. And his name was Manoah. And one day his wife received a mystery visitor, identified in the text as the angel of the Lord, or an angel of the Lord. But both the textual tradition in both Judaism and Christianity is that that was some sort of visitation from God. And this is all in Judges 13, if you want to note that down. And Manoah's wife, like so many women in the pages of Scripture, was married and had no children. And this was a tragedy, because that was the social safety net. You had enough children to take care of you when you got old, as you took care of them when they were young. So Manoah's wife one day gets this mystery visitor, an angel of the Lord, who tells her that God knows that she hasn't had any children, but she's going to have a son. And she must be very careful, eat, no wine, stay away from grapes altogether, because the baby will be dedicated to God from his birth. There was a special vow that you could take called the Nazarite vow. You didn't cut your hair, you didn't drink wine, you didn't eat grapes, you stayed away from a couple of other things, and you were essentially dedicated to God for the period of this vow. Paul, over 1,000 years later, Paul is in the temple doing that when a riot breaks out, and he's taken by the Romans and nearly beaten. And that sets in motion the events that lead him to Rome. Well, this is unusual, because Samson is going to be under a Nazarite vow all of the days of his life, from before he's born until he draws his last breath. And this unnamed woman runs off to find her husband and tells him what she has been told. And Manoah is a bit on the skeptical side. And he prays, Lord, if that really was some sort of visitation from you, if that was a messenger from you, let it appear to me so I can hear it firsthand too. So the very next day, Manoah's wife is where she was, and she has her husband with her, and the mystery guest appears again. And he repeats everything that he told to Manoah's wife. And Manoah, perhaps somewhat belatedly catching on to his obligations as a host, offers the stranger a meal, which the stranger declines. But he says, if you want to do anything, make an offering to the Lord. So Manoah and his wife bustle a little bit. They come back with a small offering. They place it on a flat rock. And then the mysterious stranger takes the staff he has been walking with, touches the end of it on the food, poof! Flame consumes the offering. There's a puff of smoke, and the visitor is gone too. And at this point, Manoah cries out in fear and says, we are doomed. We have looked on the face of God. And the wife thinks a second and goes, wait. If God meant to kill us, why would he tell us we're going to have a baby? That's why she's one of my favorite characters in the entire Bible. It's that even in the midst of all the mystery, she never loses sight of the practicalities. You know, God wouldn't appear to you to tell you you're going to have a baby in 9 months' time if he meant to strike you down on the same day. And don't you think she was Quaker up one side and down the other? I mean, you see the same sort of practicality all over the place in the Christian New Testament, you know, the Sermon on the Mount, you know, or the teaching that Jesus gives, if your brother has anything against you, leave your gift at the altar, go be reconciled, and then come back and offer your offering in good conscience. Or there are several parables about God, you know, about the master of the servants going away on a long journey, and blessed is the servant that the master finds at his post when the master returns. Or that favorite of early Quakers in, you know, the book of James, where, you know, the entire second chapter is essentially devoted to the theme, faith without works is dead. You know, you say you have faith and somebody comes into your gathering who doesn't have enough to eat, doesn't have, you know, suitable clothes to wear, you know, to keep out the elements. What are you going to do? You say, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, or are you actually going to get the person help? You know, it's the parable of the sheep and the goats. You know, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, he is very well disposed towards people who see somebody who is sick or in prison or lonely or hungry, and takes care of that need. And that is essentially the community testimony in Quakerism, isn't it? In the Middle Ages in Europe, learning and technology were kept alive in the monasteries. And for a good extent of that period, especially in the first half of it, that was a necessary thing, because the monasteries had you hoped the monasteries had high, strong walls, and you know, the marauding barbarians and Vikings couldn't get in. But by the time of George Fox, you know, we're talking 400 or 500 years later, things have settled down considerably. You know, the only people you have to worry about at that point are members of your own country. And you have William Penn, who is essentially about 20 years younger than George Fox, making the famous pronouncement, "True godliness don't turn men out of the world, but enables them to live better in it, and excites their efforts to mend it. Not to hide their light under a bushel, but to set it on a candlestick on a table." You know, we aren't any good as a religious group if people aren't touched by us. That is part and parcel of being a Quaker. It is also part and parcel of the best traditions in Judaism and other forms of Christianity. So before we set her down, I want to read something to you that I posted on our meeting's Facebook page within the last, I guess it was yesterday. Jesus always chose loving the neighbor over loving theology. Jesus always chose sitting with the vulnerable over standing with the powerful. Jesus always chose healing the broken over correcting their brokenness. Jesus always chose empowering the poor over defending the rich. Can we say the same?